All right, folks, we may finally have an end to this godforsaken GM search for the New York Mets. Adam Cromie appears to be the front runner, and I'll talk all about him on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans who are listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Now, on today's show, we are going to discuss the latest frontrunner to take the position of the new Mets GM, and that is Adam Cromie, former assistant GM of the Washington Nationals. In the first segment, I just want to go through where we are right now in the hiring process, why Cromie appears to be the answer here. In the second segment, I'll go through his background, why this could be a good hire. And then the last segment, I'll draw my final conclusions on where things stand with Cromie and whether the Mets should ultimately pull the trigger and make this their new GM. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also follow the show at Locked On Mets and find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So before we talk about Adam Cromie, I do want to say that this is about 2 weeks removed from the last time I talked about the Mets front office search. And then I was livid because I had spent a whole day going through research talking about Scott Harris, I believe is the executive. I don't even remember if it's Scott Harris is his first name, if it's Josh Harris. Although I think Josh Harris is the owner of the 76ers who was in the mix to buy the Mets, if I got my Harris's correct. But the bottom line is I spent all this time on a Scott Harris podcast and then found out like an hour later after the podcast was all put together that, oh yeah, even though everyone was saying this is the front runner, that was not the case, and he was not leaving San Francisco. So I said, look, I'm done talking about this front office search because it is just foolish to continue to go through this exercise of breaking down a candidate. Candidate falls off the table, they decline to interview, or they pull their name from the running, or the Mets don't want to pursue that avenue any further, and then we move on to the next one. The coverage of this story has been infuriating at times because it's ratcheted up to 11, right? There is no other team in baseball that would have got the coverage that this GM search has gotten. Now, I am convinced of that. Now, you could say the Mets maybe mishandled this more than any other franchise in baseball, but I think that is even a little bit of, an exaggeration to the coverage because the coverage is always LOL Mets. Mets are terrible. Mets are gonna Mets. Mets are blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I don't think, and I've said this before, if the Twins were interviewing a new president of baseball operations, we would hear anything until the name of the hire was announced. And so for the Mets, because there's so many reporters covering the team, because there's so much interest in the Mets, because the national media loves to sort of poke fun at the Mets and rile up the fans, this thing has gotten covered to an extreme that I think is a little bit ridiculous. And so I have had the stance that on this show, I was not going to talk about it until there was actually some concrete reporting that led us to believe that the Mets were near making a hire. And I feel pretty comfortable now to talk about Adam Cromie. Now, the fact that I'm talking about this at 3:04 in the afternoon on Wednesday, that probably means one of two things is going to happen before this needs to be released as Thursday's episode of Locked On Mets. Either Cromie's going to get hired, and some of the things that I'm going to say here, talking about hypothetical, are going to turn into reality, and maybe this is going to feel a little outdated, or his name's going to get pulled from the running again, and I'm going to be wasting my time talking about this guy. But because the reporting is leading us to believe that this is going to be the guy that he met with Sandy Alderson on Tuesday night face-to-face, there's been multiple interviews up to this point. He does have a resume that we'll get into in a bit that is suitable for this position. the Mets need to make a hire, it seems like this could be the direction they're going to go. And the perception nationally is going to be you struck out on everyone, so you had to grab somebody who wasn't even in baseball anymore, and you had to hire them because no one who was in baseball wanted the job. So let's just start there really quick. And to understand where Cromie's been, he decided to pursue a career in law. And I'll talk about that and his ambitions and why that was a choice he made after 2017. But at the end of the day, one of the things that I've been saying recently is I wanted the Mets to maybe look at people that didn't already have jobs, like Michael Hill, like some of the other executives that are on the open market, because, hey, they don't have to ask their current employer if they can leave, if they can interview. There isn't that push and pull of whether you can poach an executive or not. They're not already sitting in a good situation. So to finally look at somebody that has a resume but was a little bit removed from their baseball ties, that's fine for me. It doesn't bother me at all that he hasn't been in the game for the last 5 years. He's been working as a lawyer, and that's okay. At the end of the day, the biggest thing for me is that they just make a hire. And that's why I wanted to talk about this on the front end before I even get into who this guy is, because you need some resolution here. At the end of the day, we can talk about the sandwich of the Aldersons, right? You have Sandy Alderson, the president. Bryn Alderson has been promoted as an assistant GM, which is a position that, nepotism or not, he has a resume for. But the optics of that for a new executive to come in and work above Sandy's son, under Sandy, in the middle of this Alderson sandwich with Steve Cohen being a new owner, I get why that's pushed some executives away. I get that there is uncertainty about going to a job that has such a short shelf life, where we've seen executive after executive get turned over, manager after manager get turned over, everyone chewed up and spit out by the New York media and left with a tainted resume. Like, I understand why this job hasn't been that attractive, but the only way that you're going to move past that is to build winning season after winning season and disprove that narrative. Steve Cohen has to prove that he's a good owner and it has a good environment to work for. They've started building up an analytics department. They've started to build up their scouting, their technology, all of it. This stuff takes time. And you know what? If you make a hire here with someone like Adam Cromie that does have a resume, that does have experience, at least you can just put all this noise behind you. Because what the Mets have to focus on right now is building out their ball club. And this executive search, for whatever it's worth, has been a complete, just, I want to say cluster F. Locked On, you got to keep things a little bit cleaner than that. But that's what it's been. It has been a complete cluster bleep of a story here. And I just want it to be over. So for me, covering this team, I'm just happy that we can stop talking about this if this hire is made. But I also think for the Mets, it is very important, as you're already going through the GM meetings without a GM, to make this hire and to move past interviewing people and focus on what you need to do as a front office to build out your ball club. And at the end of the day, since the Mets are at a point right now where they're only going to make one hire, they're just going to hire a GM, and the rest of their front office, as it's presently constructed, is probably going to remain the same around that hire. Just hire someone who's qualified and get the ball rolling. And it seems like that's what they're planning on doing with Adam Cromie. Now, in a minute here, we will discuss Adam Cromie's background and why he is a qualified candidate to take over this GM position, even though he has been out of the game for a few years. BetOnline is back and better than ever, now featuring a new web interface for the start of the basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the promo code LOCKEDON. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. So who is Adam Cromie? This is the question we're all trying to answer. We're all scouring the internet, reading old profiles, figuring out what this guy brings to the table. And at the end of the day, as I've expressed in other episodes about the front office search in the past, all of this is a foolish exercise. Nobody who is analyzing this situation from my seat or yours as a fan is going to be able to differentiate what Adam Cromie brings to the table that's different from Scott Harris, or I don't know, pick your executive of the week for the Mets that has been thrown into the mix. There's just no way of actually understanding what these people do. There's not. There's no stats on it. There's no information. We're taking people for their words. And generally, if someone's going to talk on the record about somebody that they know that's working in the field of baseball, a lot of times they're talking to people who like that person. So if I read a CBS Sports profile on Adam Cromie where there's two people who've worked in baseball that rave about the guy, well, I'm sure I read something similar last offseason when the Mets hired Jared Porter. I mean, Jared Porter was this up and coming executive, the next GM, just like Cromie at one point was going to be a GM. And it's like, okay, but we really don't know. We don't know what this guy's like. Just like we didn't know Jared Porter was a disgusting human being. But then we found that out and realized it was a terrible hire. And we're at this point just trusting the people making the hire to not screw this up. And it's hard to do that. But you can't just go into every single thing saying, yeah, the Mets are going to screw it up. All you can do is hope that they get the right hire. And then from there, you see what the guy's like. You see what he, how he presents himself to the media. You see what moves the Mets are making. You see what type of an impact he has. And then you can make a real evaluation on him. Brodie Van Wagenen won all the press conferences. Who didn't fall in love with Brodie Van Wagenen right away? We all had our hesitations like, all right, let's look at the resume. Oh, there is none. He's never worked in a front office. That's weird. You're going to hire him to run your front office where he's never worked in baseball as an executive. He's been an agent. And then he talked to us and he spoke with the media. And it's like, wow, look how sharp this guy is. This guy is just put together, knows how to answer questions, good looking guy, Brodie Van Wagenen. And then he trades Jared Kelenic for Robinson Cano. Like, wait a minute. This guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing, does he? And we watched it play out for a couple of years. So we don't know. But to get into the resume, because that's what you're here for, we'll dive in. So Adam Cromie was the former assistant GM and vice president of the Washington Nationals. So had he not had that former attached, he'd be right up on the top of everyone's list. Look, he's the number 2 or number 3 in an organization, a great hire. But because he's been removed, people are going to laugh at this hire for whatever that's worth. Now, you look at his career, and basically, from what I've read about Adam Cromie, he, like a lot of us, wanted to work in baseball. But he's way smarter than someone like me, who, personally, I at one point had dreams of being a GM myself, and then I did not make it to my 8 a.m. econ class 2 semesters in a row, wasted $700 a class on that thing. And I switched my career to journalism. I majored in journalism, found out I was pretty good at writing, and stuck with that. And I didn't have to take 8 a.m. econ classes or any other advanced math. And hey, it's worked out for me. Adam Cromie is a guy that actually was able to do all that hard school work. He went to Allegheny College, playing 4 years of football there, apparently, earned his master's degree in sports management from the University of Massachusetts. He then interned as a video scout for Baseball Info Solutions, also worked for an indie league team, eventually got an opportunity to work with the Washington Nationals in an unpaid internship. He was hesitant to take the job because, hey, it was unpaid. I think he had already sort of paid his dues a bit and wasn't sure if this was going to lead to anything, slept on it, decided, you know what, I can't pass on this opportunity to prove myself, work from being an unpaid intern in that organization to being near the top of the front office. He worked in a million different departments at a time where these teams didn't have, 10, 15, 20 people working in their front offices. It was, very bare bones, and he had to do a lot of different things. He had to build out the Nationals analytics department himself. He wore a ton of different hats in scouting and analytics and player development and baseball operations. He's done it all. So I look at people who are saying that because he's been removed from the game, he doesn't have a pulse on the game. To me, that is a little bit misconstrued. This is a guy who spent a decade working in baseball. He's going to go into a front office where I believe there are still some pretty functional parts of the Mets front office when it comes to their scouting department, their player development. They're getting better. They're investing a ton in technology, and they've made some really good hires over the past year under Steve Cohen that are still in the building, Ben Zosmer and others. So I think that at the end of the day, when you're talking about what the Mets need right now, they needed someone that can get plugged in, that has a resume, that can pick things up quickly. And I think Cromie is a smart guy. He's 38 years old, got a law degree while he was at the top of a front office for the Nationals. And he decided to pursue that, but that doesn't make him any less smart. That actually makes him even more intelligent, that he was able to work on multiple things. And he had this itch he wanted to scratch of being a lawyer. I don't know why you'd want to go from the playhouse of baseball and work in law, but there are people who are drawn to those types of careers. And he had two different paths that he wanted to pursue in his professional career: baseball and law. And ultimately, when he got the degree, he decided to pursue law. I'm not going to say that that makes him any less of a baseball executive that's capable of handling this job. It's just something he chose to do. Now he's interested in this position. He has a chance to be a GM. And if he's going to work well with Sandy Alderson and Steve Cohen, while I don't believe necessarily that I want Alderson and Cohen to be the ones really guiding this ship, and I would have much rather the Mets hired a well-respected baseball executive that could have come in here and taken over. Since that's not on the table right now, since they struck out with so many of these other people, let's just get someone in place that's going to work well with all the different departments, where you can stop focusing on making this hire. You can move on to hiring a damn good manager, and then you can work on building out your baseball team. And ultimately, once you get a coaching staff in place, once you get your players in place, it's about playing the game, and it's not much about who's going to be, running baseball ops and all this stuff. And I think that where the Mets are going right now, the pie in the sky that they're trying to get to is next offseason. The fact that they continue to leave that president seat open, and the fact that David Stearns has a contract that's coming up, that's the most interesting thing for me right now. It's looking ahead a little bit. And I hate this idea of having to go through this process again, but maybe Adam Cromie is the perfect bridge to David Stearns. And that's what we're going to talk about here. You look at it, and if the Mets ultimately make this hire and we get to put this whole dance behind us, and we could focus just on this offseason. But when you're looking at the front office moving forward with Cromie in place, let's just say this year the Mets have a good season. Maybe they don't win the World Series, but let's just say, they either win the division or they're a wild card team. Cromie proves himself as a solid hire. The Mets front office has less turmoil. There's no, the Jared Porter situation. There's no Zach Scott DUI. There's just a relatively calm season for a Mets team that seems like it's always in flux. Then you get to the offseason, and David Stearns expresses interest in coming back up to the New York area and running the New York Mets. And he's interested in getting a huge bag of cash from Steve Cohen and getting a monster contract. You make that hire, and then suddenly you can put all of this behind you, and now the Mets would be moving in the right direction. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that this offseason. And I think we wanted to see that happen now. We didn't want to wait for another full year for the Mets to finally have an established front office. But as much as we knock Sandy Alderson, as much as I don't want Sandy Alderson running baseball operations, as much as Sandy Alderson feels like a man that is ready to retire, I still believe in some of the executives in that front office. I still believe in Tommy Tanos and what he's done with the scouting. I believe in the research and analytics department that they're building up. So if those things continue to bear fruit over this year, and Cromie can be someone that can almost be a glue guy, holding it all together, has a ton of experience, can wear a bunch of different hats, is someone who's motivated, who's young, who's hungry, who's going to be there every day, being on top of people, leading, then at least you're moving in a more fluid direction than you are right now, where there's just that constant, okay, I guess Sandy's going to have to do more. It's always coming back to Sandy. So maybe at least if you get this guy in there, it can put everyone into the right roles, the front office that you have right now can be optimized for what it's worth. And then maybe next year, you get the Stearns, you get the Brian Cashman, a couple of those monster executives that could be available. And then you can really maybe become that East Coast Dodgers. I don't think that you're going to get there, obviously, at least when it comes to the front office this season, but you can still have a damn good year. You can still put a good ball club together, especially if Steve Cohen is planning on investing the way we believe he will when it comes to the payroll. And, at the end of the day, we get back to just talking about baseball, and that's the most important part. I think that all of us are ready to just end this search. That's my biggest takeaway from the show today. It's pretty obvious. I just don't like talking about this stuff. So hopefully this is the last time. Hopefully we get the news that Cromie's hired. We put all this behind us and we move forward with the off season. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. On tomorrow's show, a Friday Farm Report. We're going to do the Double-A Awards with Jordan Grossman, naming your best pitcher, your best player, best slugger. All that good stuff is coming for you. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Mets YouTube channel. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects. Hosted by my guy, Aram Layton, Locked On MLB Prospects is the best place to go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects wherever you get podcasts.